Okay, after that long, terrible speech, let's get this show on the road. Like I said, I'm using the Caracal Decals set for the B52s. As far as I know, this is made for the Minicraft model, but still, it's an awesome little sheet, and it's got some beautiful squadron markings, etc., etc. If you don't want to go with what's included in the kit. Here's the infamous instructions. You'll be referring to them a couple of times unless you're some kind of a super being that just can put stuff together without using a manual. Just a quick note here on the actual plastic. To me, the plastic resembles Tamiya kind of plastic. It's not too hard, not too soft, and it's just generally a good kit. Also, there's a couple of slide molded parts, the engine nacelle being one of them, and I think there's a couple of other parts here that I can't remember right now that was also slide molded. The decals that come with the kit is apparently printed by Cartograph, so there shouldn't be any problems with them, but like I said, I didn't use them, so take that with a pinch of salt. Also included in the decal plastic bag is a masking set for the clear parts. And that's a very nice masking set, by the way. The smell of fresh plastic in the morning. After you've opened up that bag. Now you've got no way of returning. And yep, let's get this build started. Someone asked me recently to just show how I remove parts from sprues, etc., etc. Yeah, that didn't happen anyway. I just felt like showing the process that I go through when I'm removing parts from sprues, etc., and cleaning up. Keep in mind that this was a fun build, so there's not too much sanding going on here, although I cleaned most of the parts with a scalpel blade and a knife. And yeah, I mean, the kit goes together really well. There's no real issues except for, like I mentioned in my little speech, about some of the smaller parts and location tabs and pins and points. That's not non-existent, they're just very, very tiny and very small. One of the first things you need to construct is the Bombay / landing gear area. And yeah, there was no surprises here. Everything went well. Everything fits together quite well. Once again, I can just recommend keeping an eye on the instructions. you end up with a Bombay gear bay area that's, in my opinion, quite detailed for a 1/44th scale kit. Onto the landing gear, and both of them are one-piece parts for the front and aft landing gear struts. Just clean them up, and yeah, just take note, there is actually landing lights on the landing gear, and as far as I know, these are on the starboard side of the real plane, so just make sure that you stick them in the correct way. Once again, just refer to the instructions. Onto the cockpit area, and here I have one little tip. Paint the ejection seats at least some kind of olive drab, and maybe the headrests red like in the real plane, because they are actually visible through the windshields once the plane is complete. It's too late for me now, of course, to do that, but anyway. What does a B52 do best? It carries bombs, and lots of bombs. This stage of the build reminded me of individual track building for an armor kit. Yeah, it's not that bad, but it's just very monotonous, and I get really bored really quickly when I have to do the same thing over and over again. So just remove the little bombs from the sprue, and I used some double-sided tape to stick them to a piece of acrylic to get them ready for the paint shop. Onto the bomb racks, and just a note here again, there's two different sides of the bomb racks in this kit. Just make sure you're painting the correct ones and removing the correct ones for your build. Yep, those little tabs on there is where you're going to stick the bombs onto later on, and lots of fun. I forgot earlier on to actually mention that I'm building my B52 with the landing gear down and the Bombay doors open. If you haven't realized by now that checking the instructions is part of this build, then there's the last reminder. I promise I won't say anything any further about the instructions again. Also, I like to include my ups in my builds, and here is one big up again. The Bombay doors are two independent parts that you glue into the fuselage halves, and for some reason I don't think it's really a kid's fault. This is my fault. I did not check when I glued them in if they were sitting in the correct position, and they were sitting a bit, well, not actually a bit, they were way off. And yeah, this is a technique that I don't know, some guys might know of, others might not, so I included it. Once you've glued something into place and it's now stuck there, the way to get rid of it or to remove it is to add more glue, because that glue will unglue the previous glue. And after a couple of minutes, you'll be able to remove the part. With some patience and help of a scalpel blade, Bob's your uncle. I just glued it back immediately, since there was already a ton of glue on there, into the correct position this time. Yay, Gordon! A little side story. Yep, that bottle of MiG ammo glue tipped over. As you can see there on my workbench, yeah, that glue went all over the place. All my Tamiya glues are of course in little holders, so Murphy's Law, the one bottle that's not in a holder, that's the one that's gonna tip over. On to dry fitting the fuselage, and yep, the fuselage is slightly warped, as you can see there, but yeah, nothing that glue will fix at the end of the day. Not a major issue. Away on to my favorite part of model building, painting. And in this case, I'm using Gunzi 69 off-white for the white areas on the B52. I usually do a 50% mix, 50% paint and 50% thinner. In this case, I'm using unicorn tears or angel tears or whatever you want to call it, better known as Gunzi leveling thinner to thin the paint. And usually I use a 50-50 mix for the general painting of general areas like the landing bay and the Bombay example. Also, I always test my paint before I start spraying it on the kit. Here's my good old Skyline mule, paint mule, and yep, then it's on to the actual part that I want to get painted. Once again, I start off with very thin coats, as you can see. Also, you'll see that the airbrush is splattering a little bit, and that's because the end cap is on there. Later on in the video, you'll see that I'm airbrushing and I remove the end cap, which usually fixes the splattering. I systematically just build up the layers and make sure that I reach every area inside this slightly complicated part. The bomb racks also got a coat of Gunzi 69 off-white. And back to the Bombay and the landing gear bay to give it another light coat of some off-white. Okay, well, that's the end of part 1, and if you haven't done so already, I humbly ask that you subscribe to my channel. That's not for me to make millions of dollars, but just to improve the YouTube algorithm so that the videos get more exposure. Happy modeling, and I'll see you in part 2 of this little 1/44th B52H build. How's it, everyone? This is Gordon from Keto Model Works, and let's continue with part 2 of the Academy Boeing B52H 1 to 1/44th scale kit. If you watched part 1 of this build so far, then you would have seen my terrible speech, and where I was talking about connection points on this kit. These little bombs is one great example of that problem, and you're more than welcome to watch me struggle with this, and hopefully it'll help someone so that you don't struggle when you're putting this beautiful kit together. As I said in my speech, the connection points are really small and vague, which is a bit more frustrating, is the fact that there's so many bombs that you have to put onto these little pylons, and so therefore, yeah, it's not too much fun. course, there's these wonderful moments where I'm a total dumbass, and this is one of them. What I was trying to do here was attach these bombs with Tamiya glue, which, as most of us know, kind of sets quite quickly. And the biggest tip that I can give you when you're assembling these bombs is not to use Tamiya glue or not to use the regular thin or super thin that sets quite quickly. It's best to use something that takes a while to set so that you have ample time to adjust the bombs, and then eventually, you know, everything will eventually line up. But I mean, this is probably the only real complaint that I have about this kit is these small attachment points. I really do think that Academy could have made them a bit more, what can we say, positive. But yeah, anyway, eventually things line up and we get back to the actual Bombay, and luckily the pylons actually get into these little holes quite easily. Ta-da! You eventually have a completed bomb bay for your 1 to 1/44th scale B52H. Yay! Moving on to other important parts of the kit, the cockpit tub or cockpit area, whatever you want to refer to it as, fitted with no real issues, and a little bit of Tamiya extra thin soldered into place. To the undercarriage and Bombay subassembly that fits quite easily into the fuselage halves, although, you know, easily is a subjective term. As you saw in part 1, I made a big fuck up there already, although this part of the Bombay fitted quite well and there was no real issues here. Honest, you don't really need clamps to keep the Bombay and undercarriage sub-assembly in place. That was just me, well, putting a clamp in there to hold it in place, but this is not really a necessary step at the end of the day. The top part of the fuselage includes this little part that has all the sensors on it. The only tip I can give anyone here is just to pre-paint that middle sensor. In this case, I think it was zinc chromate yellow. You can probably paint it in anything yellowish or cream color or whatever from the references that I saw on the internet. Then it was time to bring the two fuselage halves together, and I think this time I do recommend using a clamp to just help you out, give you that third hand. And as usual, the Tamiya Extra thin worked its charm here, no real problems to report. Just make sure that everything clicks into place here really, and you shouldn't really have any problems with two fuselage halves. The nose part of the kit does have a slight warp in it. I'm not sure if that's something I did or if it's something that isn't lining up, but just giving it a little bit of Tamiya extra thin and a little bit of pressure fixed that problem. To some more interesting parts from the kit. This is the some aerials and sensors that's gonna go on the bottom of the fuselage. These guys fitted with no real issues as well. Like I've said, extra thin Tamiya to fit it into place, and yeah, Bob's your uncle. My tool of preference to clean up the leftover nubs is a scalpel, and as it is a scalpel, just keep it away from your thumb or your finger. Okay, let's move on to the, should I say, majestic wings of the B52. No real problems to report here once again. The wing top and bottom parts went together just fine. The only thing I really did there was pre-paint the little wing wheels areas in chromate, and yeah, the rest of it went together just fine. Although building the kit with its flaps down is not an option, the flaps are separate, and I guess if you wanted to go into a bunch of detail building or scratch building, you can probably pull off the dropped flaps on this kit. to the wings. There was a slight step when attaching the wing to the fuselage by the default stub, or whatever you want to call that, as you can see there. And with a little bit of sanding and working it, I eventually got it to fit in there with no issues. Like I've said multiple times before in other videos, one of the biggest tips I can give anyone is to dry fit and dry fit and dry fit a little bit more until you get the part fitting the way that it's supposed to. Also here I'm using a scraping tool that I got a recommendation from one of my Gunpla Gundam friends that they use to clean up their parts, and yeah, just cleaning the leading and trailing edge and wingtips here from a little bit of residue glue that came out from squeezing the parts together, and that sometimes leaves a little ridge of glue that I just cleaned up with that scraper. Moving to the elevator parts of the kit, just like the rest of the kit, no real problems to report here. The top and bottom parts fitted really well, and yep, just a little bit of cleaning up, like I said, the little bit of glue, etc., that came out after squeezing the parts together, and that was about it. The time came to attach the main wings to the fuselage, and just run a couple of beads of Mr. Hobby's Cement S down the attachment point there, just to not have some kind of a little surprise down the road with some wing detaching or something like that. So yep, just multiple times repeated that to get that wing stuck to the fuselage really well. Moving on to the engine nacelles. Yeah, they're a bit tricky sometimes. Beautifully slide molded parts here, but I wish that I had actually paid a bit more attention cleaning up these nubs. I don't know if it's the way that the plastics form there or something, but you can, on my kit, you can still see where the nubs were. That's even after sanding it. Yeah, don't know exactly what happened there, but just a tip once again. See if you can get that nub sanded and maybe even polished away before you paint your kit. Engine pylon fitted really well to the engine nacelles. Nothing to really report problematic here once again. As you can see, this build is progressing really well, and I'm looking forward to part 3 and you joining me as well for part 3. As usual, I humbly ask to like the videos and comment and subscribe if you feel like that. And part 3, we're going to start concentrating on painting this beautiful kit. Until then, keep safe, and I'll see you guys again.
good everybody? It's Gordon from Keto Model Works, and today we're gonna concentrate mostly on playing with 100 shades of grey. Now all you pervs and whack jobs, relax. This has nothing to do with the movies and red rooms and damsels in sexual distress, or maybe it does. Recently at the model club meeting, one of the members asked me, how do you mask your wheelbase on your aircraft? Well, the answer to that is you use some sponge, and I usually buy the super cheap stuff from an auto parts store. You usually break them or cut them into pieces depending on how violent you want to be that day, and you shape it to whatever hole or cavity you want to mask. And poke it in there with a stick or your paintbrush handle, or it doesn't really matter what kind of hard object you want to use. Poke the sponge into the wheelbase, and they usually conform to the shape of whatever bay or hole you're trying to poke them into. That sounds really terrible, but anyway, if you like to poke stuff or poke some stuff with a stick that day, then this will be an awesome time to do some stress relief, etc., etc. Another piece of masking material that I used in this build is some of the armor putty or silly putty or whatever the hell putty you want to call it. The only thing is that this kind of putty settles after a while and it will actually expand out. So just beware of that. If you want to like spray a camo or something like that, you're gonna have to do it, like quickly. I just take a scalpel knife and cut off the excess, and the world is a better place. Well, not really, but anyway. Okay, the next step is to clean the model with some isopropyl alcohol to prep it for paint. This is to remove any sticky fingerprints or slimy shit or whatever is possibly on the kit. I don't know where people get their hands into these days, but yeah, this is just to remove any dirt or fingerprints or even some previous paint. Well, anything that does not need to be on the kit. You can employ an earbud or a Q-tip or whatever the hell you want to call the thing to also clean up surfaces in smaller areas. You can also employ a toothbrush if you want to get really violent. Unlike Tamiya, Academy has provided us with a pre-cut mask for the clear plastic parts. And I have to say that this masking set fits 100%. I use some silicone paint movers or whatever the hell they call these things to push down little pieces of masking tape. One of the most important things you can ever do in scale modeling is to test fit. Don't say you weren't warned. And then, we're gonna actually use some super glue to stick clear plastic. And don't let anyone ever tell you in some bullshit Facebook group or something that you can't use super glue to glue clear parts. It's just gotta be a specific super glue, better known as foam friendly super glue, and this Bob Smith Super Gold and Super Gold Plus does an excellent job of gluing your clear parts with super glue. This super glue allows you ample work time, and you have a couple of minutes to apply the glue on the kit and then insert your clear plastic part. on to the next step, priming and super thin coats of primer. In this instance, I'm using my favorite primer brand, Mr. Hobby, and this is the black version of that primer. This is a 50-50 mix at this stage. Oh shit, I'm lying. It's about a 70-30 mix, 30% paint and 70% thinner. And yeah, multiple thin coats is the name of the game. Okay, let's speed this shit up and do one of my favorite things. Watch some paint dry. Now, the real reason is I don't want to put you through all the agony of watching this at normal speed, but I still want you to see what I'm doing. So once again, I have to be like a hemorrhoid that's beating preparation H and remind you once again how painful it can be if you just slap on paint. Thin coats are always the secret to a smooth finish. Rather do 5 thin coats than 1 fat coat. I can't be more clear or crass about it. If you still don't get the message, then I don't have any hope for you. So somehow my dumbass caused a step on the top part of the fuselage. Agony. So sit back, relax, and enjoy all the agony of scraping and sanding and all those real model builder techniques that you know. More agony and some more agony and some more fucking agony. Then some sanding and some scraping and some cleaning, then some airbrush blowing, you name it. You get the idea. You're getting super value in this fucking video. In short, don't be a dumbass like me. See Gordon, don't do what Gordon does. Have I ever said that I hate sanding? Well, I fucking hate sanding. It's time to spray primer again to check the work that I've just done. And unfortunately, the primer did exactly what it needed to do and showed that there will be some, you guessed it, more sanding. And some more sanding, and then some more sanding. What's that I hear you say? Didn't he say something about test fitting earlier? Test fit, and fucking test fit again. Then some blasts of water with my airbrush. Who always wanted to pressure wash a B52, right? Said no one ever. Pressure washing, sanding, pressure washing, sanding, pressure washing, sanding, pressure washing. Rinse and repeat, say that 20 times over. Okay, well, after all that super sanding fun, half the panel lines were missing. No shit. So I have learned the hard way when it comes to scribing once again. The secret is multiple light runs. And then once the line is in place, you can actually put some pressure on it and put it in there. Hook tour! Holy shit, I nearly forgot about this little gem. The back end of the trumpeter scribing tool works like a treat when it comes to using it as a burnishing tool. Sometimes the trumpeter tool actually works by pushing it instead of pulling it. And so after a little light coat of primer, we were ready to go play with 100 Shades of Grey.
I'm 50 shades of fucked up.
Come on, you knew that was gonna come. 50 Shades of fucked up. This is more like 100 Shades of buff. And buff stands for big, ugly, fat fucker, if you didn't know that already. Okay. In all seriousness, what I'm trying to show you is that you can control the tone of gray by the amount of the same color that you apply. Think about it. The thicker you make that coat, the more opacity, and the darker the same color of gray will appear, and voila, you have tonal variation. Tonal variation, I think I'm going to call my next. Now, I say this because I've seen a lot of modelers just slap on a color of monotone gray as a base layer on the kit and then start working the variations. I say fuck it, let fun begin right from the start. Sometimes people misunderstand or forget that you can do this, just like Joba, and you saving paint. Don't ever say I don't give excellent tips. The black primer most definitely also has an effect on the shades of grey, and I think I forgot to mention it when I started priming with the black, that the main reason for, except for it being a primer, it was also going to play a big role in the shades of grey. Also realized that grey seems to be a not so great color to video. I'm not going to get into the science of it because you might already be asleep by now, but in short, the contrast in real life was higher than in the ZIF's footage. The footage. once again, to get that lovely tonal variation, you can play around with little spots everywhere, etc., etc. Increase the opacity in those areas, go over it with the same color just lightly, and yeah, once again we have tonal variation. Also, the sponge that I so cheaply bought at the auto parts store works great for dry tip. I just push my airbrush in there and voila, dry tip be gone. Okay, let's speed up this shit again so that the people that's still awake don't have to sit through this one monotone gray shade that I'm spraying onto the buff right now. So this is a 1:144 scale model, and I don't want to have too much contrast between the grays. And so here I've started with the interesting stuff. I'm using some Tamiya XF80, super thin like 80% thinner and about 20% paint. And then I thin it out even more when I wanted to do more fading or blending to about 90% thinner and 10% paint. Note, blending, toning down, and fading. I choose specific areas that I want lighter, especially over areas like the vortex generators. In that area would naturally have more friction and therefore more weathering. Another technique I like to do is to purposefully apply the paint in a spotty effect. All this does at the end of the day is to increase the tonal variation once again between the two grays that I have on the kit right now. Instead of just doing little spotties all over the place, you can do little S's like I'm doing right here. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what pattern you follow as long as there's a difference in opacity. Okay, let's take a look at the different shades of gray that I could identify from the reference photos that I'm working on. And so we have at least 5 shades of gray, and then some gray shading from dark to light and from light to dark. And in reality, there's probably, guess what, 100 shades of gray on this plane in reality. But I'm gonna stick to 5 or 6 or 8 or maybe 9. This is also a rather well-weathered B52 that I am using as my main reference. Now I'm coming in with some Mr. Hobby H305 in the spots that I felt that was overdone with the Tamiya XF80. Remember, if the paint ain't wet when it hits the plastic, then you are going to get a rough texture. Okay, let's get to some serious shit for a change. Masking. Masking is so satisfying. It really is one of my favorite stages when it comes to model building, unlike sanding. I can look at this the whole day long. I'm gonna try some positive masking and some negative masking on the bottom of the wings. Some failed business cards are also gonna come in for some quick masking. There's someone out there thinking, how do I mask these specific areas? Well, once again, reference photos or pictures is your best friend. Of course, no one's stopping you from using your artistic license. And yeah, I have to admit that some of that was definitely employed in the build of this B52. Just to be a pain in the ass again, this is super thinned Mr. Hobby H305 that I'm using here to build up layers of opacity. Probably thin to 80% thinner and 20% ratio of paint. I lied. There's one thing better than masking. Demasking. Let's get into some what I recall negative masking, where the actual masking tape is gonna mask the lighter color and I'm gonna spray a darker color over it. This right here is me employing my artistic license. There's no pictures that I could find of the bottom part of a B52 flap area that was clear enough, so yeah, I'm pulling this completely out of my ass. These silicone squeegees are the bomb. Wait, did I just create a new name for these things? Paint mover or silicone paint mover is so formal. I think I'm gonna call them silicone squeegees from now. Well, that looks like something my dog just threw up. Not to worry, with the help of handy dandy editing, we're going to fix this in just a couple of seconds. Here we go. With a super thin coat of Tamiya XF77, I'm blending the Mr. Hobby H305 back a little bit, and voila, just look at that. Of course, the rudder on the B52 still believes in apartheid, and therefore it needed its own little grey shade. Okay, well, let's do what I refer to as fast masking. That's just if you want to build up some contrast between certain areas, then, well, don't do what I just did there. In this case, I'm using, like I said, failed business card, and just to make a contrasting line between the wing and the flaps. Here I decided to use some super thin H305 again, just to build up a base for some future weathering. And the elevators got the same treatment. Okay, another masking method I used for this slightly complicated antenna on top of the fuselage. I employed some Tamiya curving masking tape and some Mr. Hobby Mr. Masking Soul Neo, which completely neoed up my fucking fuselage area. And yeah, here's another job that needs to be fixed. And as I mentioned before, I show my fuck ups in my videos, so that everyone can learn. And yep, here we go. We're cleaning out that area, coming back in with the original Tamiya XF70 super thinned to clean that mess up. Please note, I'm actually not spraying paint here, I'm just drying the lacquer paint with some air from my airbrush. It's one of the advantages of using lacquer paint, it dries nearly instantly. Rightio, time for one of my other favorite stages, clear coating. Yep, probably a favorite because it feels like I have for once in my life accomplished something. one thing I'd like to note, you might have noticed that I'm using a different airbrush. This is my Mr. Hobby Procon Boy, and I use it exclusively for clear coating. If you decide to get into this hobby on a more professional level and you want to invest in some tools, then I highly recommend getting an airbrush for a single task. One for your base coats, one for metal paints, because I can't seem to ever get those pesky metal flakes out of my fucking airbrush. Then one more for clear coats. Once again, multiple light coats will always give you the results that you're looking for. Holy shit, that has brought us to the end of this video. For those that made it all the way, I want to thank you, and for those sleeping, I don't want to wake you, but seriously, I appreciate the support, and I'm nearly at 2,000 subscribers. I never thought I would even make it to 100. So thank you to all that watches my goofy curse-ridden content. Next video I'll be finishing off this buff. Okay, the guys don't have to be so fucking excited about that. Anyways, stay safe, go build a model, and I will see you soon. Remember to silicone squeegee your wife tonight. How's it, everybody? This is Gordon from Keto Model Works, and today we're going to continue with the build of the Academy 1 to 1/44th scale Boeing B52H buff. So what we're going to do today is finish up this build of the B52, and that will include putting on the decals, weathering, adding the small bits and pieces that are missing, and of course painting those pesky little bombs that come in a multitude of amounts in this kit. So I'll just come out and say it, this is really crappy footage of me applying the decals on the side of the B52, and absolutely no one can see what I'm doing. What I am doing is that I'm using Mr. Hobby Mark Setter and Softer. The recommended sequence of usage is usually the blue bottle first and then the green bottle. i.e. Mr. Setter first and then Mr. Softener last. For obvious reasons, you want to soften the decal once you've actually placed it in position. After you've placed it in position, go ahead and touch it, move it around as much as you want, because you will destroy that decal. Okay, next step was some weathering, and I chose to only highlight some certain panel lines on the kit, and I did that by using some Ammo MIG deep grey panel line wash. Just lightly applied that on the panel line that I wanted to highlight, and then once it's dry, just remove it with some odorless thinner. I also decided to use the panel line wash as a kind of grime indicator, especially around the vortex generators on the wings. To do the streaking from the vortex generators, I use a flat pointed brush that I just dip into the odorless thinner. And then the biggest secret that I can share with you guys is that the brush basically needs to be dry. Very, very little amount of odorless thinner is required to start manipulating the panel line wash into the little streaks for the vortex generators. Are we going to start counting how many times I say vortex generator? And quoting Mr. Bob Ross, what we need here is 3 hairs and some air. And for those of you who don't know Bob Ross, shame on you. And what that reference means is that we need to lightly touch the surface. If you are heavy-handed with this method right here, you'll simply remove all the panel line wash, and you've guessed it, you'll have to start all over again. Well, something of my ex came in usefully, and but the hair dryer will definitely help the process along of drying the panel line wash, especially if you plan on layering some other color or some more of the panel line wash. This is just a better example, closer up example of the process of applying the panel wash and then manipulating it into some grime, especially around the vortex generator. I'm gonna show the whole grime streak process from start to end, and if you don't want to watch that, you're more than welcome to fast forward a minute or so. weathering has been completed, let's move on to the last few parts of the assembly. This is a great example of a saying that we have in South Africa. With enough force, you can break off your finger in your asshole. In this case, yeah, I nearly broke off the elevator. Just needed a little bit of a adjustment, and it fitted just fine after that. At this stage, I wanted to continue some of the weathering, and I decided to highlight some spots on the buff with Tamiya XF66 in this case. I applied it where I thought there would be some tonal difference. This is complete hocus pocus. There are no references for this weathering, unlike in the previous video. It's complete artistic freedom. I spotted a pesky hair that somehow got into the undercarriage bay and promptly removed it. As I've said before, if you want to watch videos of, ooh, look at my perfect model kits and I make no mistakes at all, then this is not the channel for you. And now it's time to finish up the last couple of bits and pieces before completing the final assembly. Most of the assembly was completed. I used my trusty old method of Mr. Hobby GX100, thinned with some Mr. Leveling Thinner to seal in all the fun. Yes, this stuff is lacquer based and it will kill your lungs instantly, and so therefore please wear a respirator. I previously bought some of this Mr. Hobby grey tone super clear and decided to take it for a test run on the buff. All in all, the difference was very subtle and the complete paint job was toned down slightly. I also decided to whack down some of the grey tone clear onto those pesky decals to avoid any decal silvering. Here I'm just making sure to get in all the nooks and crannies of the buff. Continued the weathering, and especially these exhaust vents on the B52's engines seems to be quite grimy, and I confirmed that after watching a video on YouTube of the startup sequence of a B52, which turns out to be very, very smoky. When attaching the engines, make sure to check what engine goes onto what position on the wing. Also, the angle of the engines, for some reason, I don't know, just doesn't look correct. Might be me that made a mistake, but in short, there is no real positive alignment of anything when you attach the engines. So this is the Achilles heel of this kit in my opinion. I think Academy could have improved the way that the engines attach to the wing. I decided to grime up the buff a bit more, especially around the, you've guessed it, the vortex generators. I used some of AK's pencils to accomplish this by wetting them and then applying the pigment with a Tamiya brush. I guess that is kind of defying the idea of the pencils, but this method works for me. you've applied too much of the pigment, you can simply remove or change it with some water. Of course, one of the greatest moments in especially aircraft modeling is the time to remove the masks from the canopy. If there's any residue on the canopy parts, I usually dampen a cotton swab with some odorless thinner, and usually most of whatever is stuck to the clear parts will come off. Okay, time for these pesky bombs. Yeah, anyways. Lots of fun painting these little guys. I, at the end of the day, just decided to cut tiny pieces of masking tape and mask off the areas that needed to be olive drab. Personally, I think that Academy could have improved this slightly, but I can't unfortunately tell you how. So Academy might actually have done it the best way that you can. of masking and lots of patience. Some of you might recall about 100 years ago I did a part 1 for this build. And I had this long intro speech that I gave about it. And I was mentioning the angles of the bombs. And here you are. The angles of the bombs and all the fun that goes along with it. Final thing to do on the Lone Star Lady was to paint the exhaust outlets that needed to be a gunmetal color. I used some of the Tamiya flexible tape to just mask that area off, and then I brush painted some Vallejo gunmetal water-based paint on there. This is also the last time that my Vallejo paint actually worked. After this, all 6 of the bottles I had dried up. Yay. Remember, scale modeling is the only hobby where shrinking your problems actually makes them more fun. So yeah, sadly we've come to the end of this build. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and most of all I hope someone learned something about this beautiful Academy B52 kit. It definitely has its issues, but I mean, no one ever said it is a Tamiya kit. So anyways, looking forward to doing the next videos for you guys, which will be the Great Wall Hobby A10 Warthog, or Vlakvark as we would say in South Africa. Once again, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Check out some merch that I've created for this specific B52 and for a lot of other kits that I've built on the channel or that featured on my Facebook page. I would really appreciate if you guys could support me by buying some merch. Put a lot of effort into making sure that it's high quality products, and yeah, thanks once again for supporting this channel, and I will see you guys again.